Good morning. My name is Greg Davis, and I would like to welcome you to the CBS ArcSafe webinar on remote racking and remote switching products for Siemens manufactured items. Now, some of the things to explain about Siemens is this. Siemens started out in Germany, as we all know, with the name like that, as a motor manufacturer, and then they worked to, in America, progress into switchgear. They bought up part of Alice Chalmers to become Siemens Alice products, and then finally Siemens products. And they did the same thing with ITE Gould in buying up their low voltage motor control center stuff. So you'd see ITE products, then Siemens ITE, and then Siemens products. And just as a sample of that, Brian, if you just show this, this is a 5600 series MCC, and you can have that thing licensed through Siemens for various things. While I'm not going to show you an actuator for it today, we do have one. And so if you've got questions, one of the things I want to mention right now is please remember you can contact us at info@cbsarcsafe.com or call us at 1-877-472-3389. So without further, what we're going to start out with today is the Siemens 8100 series motor control centers. Now, some of the things to explain about this is Siemens has the Civicom vacuum one, looks similar. It's not this exact same thing. This is the one that uses the ArcSafe 14. If you have a fixed mounted 81,000 series motor control center, the door is slightly different, and we need to know that also. So that's like a ArcSafe 14B. The ArcSafe 14 operates with the RS01, so this is the basic RS01. If you're not familiar with it, it does all trip and close operations for us. We're going to leave our AR switch off today. We can turn our power switch on and check the battery. For hooking it up, I will turn it back off. And this has got a keyway on it so that we can hook this up real easily. Let me just step around here so you can watch the operation. As I do this, it's in the closed position, so we're going to trip. And that's the operation of the ArcSafe 14 on the Siemens 81000 series motor control centers. So if you've got questions, again, email us at info@cbsarcsafe.com. Send us your pictures also so we can verify what you have as we go through stuff. So pictures are very important for us. The saying that a picture's worth 1,000 words, it really does help us to help you out. The next item we're going to look at is for the ArcSafe STL. Now, one of the funny things about this, you can have a furnace System 89 or a Siemens Tiastar. It's the same thing. Siemens bought up furnace, acquired them, and so now we've got this to be able to operate this system. We'll hold down our on button to enable. It's closed right now, so we want to turn it off. If we're going to turn it on, release this, and to just show how easy it is to come on and off, let me get over on this side now. Just the two little twist magnets right here, and we can take this right off. So that's the operation, and again, this can be either made by furnace like it says right here, or by Siemens. It's the same handle. We also do make the bucket extractor for this style of motor control center also. The next thing we're going to look at are two molded case circuit breakers. Now the first one's just a little bitty sucker right here, and then we've got, I think it's an 800 amp size frame, Kyle?
Yes.
With the handle extension on it. So both of those are going to be operated by the RSO1. Okay, and this would be like if it's mounted in a panel board or something, so it's mounted flush like this. I'll take it off after we've operated so you can see what we've got there and also here. With the one for the 800 amp Siemens ITE breaker, we did it with the handle extension, and the RSA is built for this particular setup as if you had the lockout tag out on the right side so it would clear everything. So you'll see that when I take it off and I show you this also.
Do you want to show that that control box is positionable?
No, this, oh yeah. So if you have an RSA for, just as Brian was mentioning right there, and it's got the RSA like this, we make it so this has got a magnet on it. We can set it off to the side wherever we want that's clear of the circuit breaker. And if we have to make this cord longer or something based upon your application, we can do that. So we've just made this short because that's generally what our customers need. So I'm just going to attach it back again to here. Just let it sit right there. Currently the breaker is in the closed position. So now I'll turn the RSO on. And we'll go to trip. And we'll go to close. This one only has to use one twist-on magnet. Let me turn this off. I'll take this off and we'll take a look at the back side of this RSA. So the way that this works, you can see that this locates around this little rise in the face right here. And then we position the switch handle itself or the circuit breaker in that little Delrin notch there. And that's how this setups and operates. All right, our next one, if you can close in here, Brian, where my finger's at, you can see that we've got the handle extension on this one. We do make a version of the RSA so that it can operate without the handle extension, if that's how you want to do it, but a lot of our customers like to leave the handle extension on. So we've set this one up so we've got clearance over on this side for lockout, tag out, just built into it. Let me step out of the way. Power's on. It's in the closed position. We're going to trip it. Close. Okay, so this is what you see on the back side here. This locates around the face right here. And then this side is open to accommodate the lockout tag out. So again, we do need pictures so we can help confirm that you've got the proper item that you're requesting for the remote switch actuator and stuff. And that's important to us. The Siemens, when they first started out, they had the LA breakers, and just one of the things to explain about the LA series that they bought from Alice Chalmers, there's like 3 or 4 different face sizes. So it's important to tell us the amp frame size. We're not going to show those today, but I want to say if you got Siemens Alice LAs, the old gold face or plastic face things, we've done things for these. Then they had the RLs. Their newest stuff is the WL. Now,
Greg,
yes?
can you explain on the RSA you just showed how the
the RSA knows when to stop
Oh,
and travel?
I just had Kyle brought up a good question. And it's how does this remote switch actuator know how to stop in the right position for close and open? And we have a couple of cam switches here on the side so that we're not going to over travel the distance. And that way we'll make sure that we're going only to the limits of the handle itself for the operation of the remote switch actuator. All right. Now, a couple things to mention about the Siemens WL. We've seen about 4 different door configurations. Sometimes you have the rails on the door. Sometimes you're going to have a plastic escutcheon just around the breaker. Sometimes you're going to have no escutcheon. Sometimes the door is going to have a standout mount. Those are all important to us, and we've got solutions for all those 4 different sets of problems, okay? This one itself that we've got here today is a fixed mount, and the way that this is all designed is to go around the face of the fixed mount when it's going to charge, close, and trip this breaker. So this one is set up specifically for what it's made for. This RSA can also accommodate the escutcheon, okay, as far as that goes, but we do need to have pictures of what you got so we can verify when we build it we're giving you the right application for your solution set. Now this one, because it's going to be charge, close, and trip, we'll use the RSO 3D. All right. This is the difference as far as it's set up for charge, close, and trip operations compared to the RSO 1. It uses 2 cords, one for the battery, or rather one for the charging motor and one for the closed trip solenoids. All right. Now, I'm going to turn this back on now that I've got it hooked up.
You step over to them so I can...
Okay, you get over here. All right, I can do that. All right, so we've got our cycles set at 9 because it takes 9 strokes for the RSA to be able to charge the breaker. Our T1 is set up at 5.4 for the strength of pulling it down. Our T2 is set up to 4.9. So just to explain, if you haven't seen an RSO 3 before, charge close is labeled that because you're going to see charge, you got close, and you got trip. Well, the 3 that we're going to play with today are going to be these 3. Older breakers like an ITE K-line or a first generation GEA K breaker, you would move the handle up, pull the handle back down, or pull it down in one stroke, and the breaker closes immediately upon reaching the bottom of the stroke. And so that's why that's labeled charge close. Close trip are simply for the 2 buttons on the face of the breaker for closing and tripping the breaker if that's how the breaker is configured. So we only have to touch this once and it's going to count our strokes for us. We can check the indicating gauge on the face of the breaker to see that the spring is charged at the end of that. And then we can hit the close button and the trip button and do that. After we show this item, we will show the Martech version for simply closing and tripping the breaker. I'll manually charge the breaker for that one. So here we go.
Greg, a common question we get is what do the T1 and T2 settings mean? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. Okay, so T1 and T2, the way we've set this up is we've got physical stops on the remote switch actuator so we're not going to over travel, but the motor has to run for 5.4 seconds coming down because that's how long it takes because it's doing work on the way down, and it takes less time to travel up because it's not pulling the spring but releasing that pressure going up. So that's why there's a difference in those 2. Some breakers have them very similar for both travel times going up and down, but this one is not that close. So that's what the T1s and T2s are for. And we can see that the breaker's now got the spring charged because the flag is now yellow for the charged spring. Always remember when you're talking to us to also mention what your arc flash hazard boundary is. Because you could have a breaker like this in a room and potentially have the arc flash hazard boundary be the room. So if you were going to need one of our radio remote systems to be outside of the room while you did this operation, we have that capability, and that would get you out to 100 meters away from the piece of switchgear as long as you've got a good radio path to the switchgear. So now we're going to close it and trip it. And that's the RSA for the Siemens WL breakers, and this version is the fixed mounted one.
Greg, can you explain, we had another question on T1 and T2 times. They're asking, are T1 and T2 times adjustable, or are they breaker specific?
They are breaker specific for the most part. We work to do a lot of testing to figure this stuff out before we market a product or sell it. So we play with various amp frame sizes to make sure it's not going to change as we go up in amp frame size. So going from like an 800 up to a 5,000 amp breaker, we want to make sure that if it changes at all, we post the changes and say, okay, it's good for 800 through 3,000 amps, but 4,000 to 5,000. If it changes because you've got bigger springs or something, we will work to annotate that with the RSA based on what it has to be able to do.
Can you make an adjustment to the T1 and T2 in the RSO if necessary?
So yes, we can make an adjustment. So while I've got this unhooked, I'll turn it back on. And let's say that I needed to move T1 from 5.4 to 6.5. And T2, I had to move from 4.9 up to 6.1. That's how you do it. That's all it would take to adjust the T1s. Every time you operate the RSA, turn the RSO on first to make sure you've got your settings proper for the breaker you're going to use it on in exercise. Okay? The settings, when you turn it off, it will remember. So I've just turned it off, I've turned it back on, and so if we go look, you'll see it's got just the settings that I just put in here. So it will remember those settings. It's not a volatile memory that's going to disappear. It'll remember the last set of things that you put in there. So this is what this looks like on the other side. Everything's mounted and firmly mounted so that it's going to line up with where the breaker is. The handle itself is actually water jetted to accommodate this handle. And it will only fit on the Siemens WL handle. So if you look at that, that's made to just contour to this shape and be able to go back up there and do its job. Okay, so now I've got to manually charge the breaker because we're going to use our RSK setup for the WL01 version.
Can you show the settings placard on that RSA, Greg?
Oh, real quick, yes. So each RSA has a label on it which will tell which RSO to use, how many strokes, and what you need to put T1 and T2 at, and then you can insert all that information right into the RSO 3D to be able to operate this. So that's my 9 strokes. I've got the breaker spring charged on here. Now, before I pull it out of the case so that everybody can see it, this is how it comes. You've got the RSK itself, the operating control, and this is either a 30 or 50 foot cable. For today's demonstration, I'm going to use a 6-foot cable so that I can stand close by and show everybody how this operates without having a big mess on my hands. This is what it looks like on the backside. And you can tell it's made here to locate on the breaker. Okay, and now I've got my open and close lined up right there. I've got my little nipple right down here to hook up the remote control to. Screw up. So we got that connected. Our power switch is up here on the top. We turn that on. I'll stand off here on the side. We press down our enable switch, and we're going to close the breaker. As soon as you hear it close, you release the button. Same thing when you hear it open, release the button. Okay? And that's how this is set up to operate. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to rack a Siemens GMI style breaker. Siemens' first vacuum breaker that I know of was their 3AF series, and we do have solutions for the 3AF series also. And then they went to GMI, GMSG, which is the bigger one that you'll see at the 38 kV, and the racking mechanism is the same, I think, for both the GMI and the GMSG. So we can do both of those breakers. And one of the things to also note about those, we see them both domestically, we see them internationally. Siemens has newer stuff, and they've got other stuff out there in the international world. So if you don't see something that we're doing today, but you're like, whether you're up in Canada or somewhere else, we do make things to handle like the Siemens 8BK20 series. We've done the 8BD series, which has got the handle that rotates about 60 degrees. The face lifts up, comes out a little bit. We have to use an RS2 for it. We developed that for one of our Middle Eastern companies. So we're showing just a simple cross section of what we've got for Siemens switchgear today, and I want you to understand we have a lot more out there that we can do for you. And if you need something we haven't done yet, well, guess what? We can develop it. We develop new products at the rate of almost one item a week for somebody around the world. All right, so this is our RS3 for the GMI series style circuit breaker. We use the RS04. This one's got a handheld remote we can use. I'll take this off at the end, but the first thing that has to happen, and the reason we've already got this mounted on there, is there's an interlock that has to push in about 1.5 inches to be able to engage the racking mechanism and expose the racking mechanism. And when that interlock gets pushed in, if you haven't tripped the breaker yet, it's supposed to trip the breaker. Okay, so just that's how this thing is set up and designed. It takes about 25 pounds of force to push that in and mount everything. So they already got it set up for me, and when I take it off, we'll take it off. So this is the RSO. We've got the settings already in here for this, and so I'm going to let you see it run as we operate it. Currently the breaker is in the connected position because I've got a little red indicator down here that shows that, so we're going to work to remove just by holding the button down for a second. And it takes about 55 turns for a Siemens GMI to come out.
Can you talk about how this device knows when to stop?
Now the RS04 works on torque. So it's looking at the torque that's required, and so it usually takes less torque to bring a circuit breaker out than in. And so we put a torque limit on the low end and a torque limit on the high end. for racking the breaker. We also have a mechanical clutch back here that you can't see, but I will show you when I take it off. So we've worked to test a lot of circuit breakers in our Gainesville warehouse of our sister company, Circuit Breaker Sales, so that we could know what type of force it would take to rack the breaker in and rack the breaker out. Some of the funny things that you find out when you get in this business, you realize that circuit breakers are meant to be racked at the rate a human being does it. Trying to go much faster can actually damage switchgear. So we use the motor speeds that we use based upon human experiments with people like me going up to our Gainesville warehouse and somebody timing me on racking a circuit breaker in and racking a circuit breaker out. And we're just about there. And it automatically shuts off due to torque, hitting the torque limit on the bottom side. To install the breaker, okay, all we have to do then is we will depress the install button now, and you'll see the same thing happen in reverse. Now, just remember, I mentioned Siemens has the 3AF for their other medium voltage breakers here we find domestically. It's an older limited edition, what I'll say. But you can also find these breakers, believe it or not, manufactured and licensed by Hyundai in the Middle East. Okay, instead of it saying 3AH, it'll have a slightly different designation on the start of it. You're going to go, wait a minute, that looks exactly like a Siemens breaker I'd find in America. But that says Hyundai on it. Well, it's because it's made under license. So that's some of the stuff when you're looking at your switchgear, send us the information. We will do our best to help you try and decode what you actually have. Okay? Because we can understand you're like going, man, my job is to keep the power on and lights on. I need that root mean squared curve, working on my trip unit to keep everything going with the power smooth. So we don't expect you to have all the answers. You know, we had a learning curve when we first started doing this, and I will tell you, I am still learning stuff every single day about switchgear around the world to try and help people like you out. I can hear the motor change right there, which means it's going on the bus. And that finishes the racking operation right there. So now we'll turn this off. We'll disconnect turn this off. I'll disconnect the motor from the RSO. And you'll notice when I take it off, it's going to want to pop out, and that's because of the interlock pushing the system out. Okay? So that's how that's set up to operate. One of the things I'll note about the GMI breaker is sometimes you'll see this racking mechanism flush, and sometimes you'll see it sticking out about an inch. Okay, they're both the same racking mechanism, and we just need to, you know, it helps us to know to make sure which one you have.
You want to talk about mechanical clutch?
Oh, here's the mechanical clutch, just to mention it real quick. This is a perfect torque clutch, and what we do is we work to rack a whole bunch of breakers, and then we take the values that we found for the maximum torque, and we're going to add a couple of foot-pounds to that to set the clutch so we know that we're not going to hurt this stuff. So we'll normally set this clutch at about 3 to 5 foot-pounds above the highest force we've seen racking a breaker, so we're not going to let it try and put any more force into the racking mechanism than what we've seen in the warehouse. If you haven't racked breakers in a long time at a facility, you may find yourself having to manually turn the racking mechanism maybe a quarter of a turn to break it loose. And what I'm going to give you is an example I ran up in Alaska in a substation with Westinghouse DHP breakers. They hadn't racked a circuit breaker in 9 years. And I went up there to help train people up there. It took 27 foot-pounds to get this particular DHP breaker in and out with our RS1. When we went to the hydroelectric facility inside of a mountain using the same size breaker, the DHP values were much closer to normal, which was down at 17 and 15. 17 for move, 15 for install. Okay, so if you've not done maintenance on your switchgear, our remote racking equipment isn't going to fix your lack of maintenance. It may help identify the fact you have not been doing maintenance because you may be having to use higher values to get things in and out. But that's what it's telling you right there, is if your equipment's not using the normal torque values that we set, you probably need to get maintenance done on your switchgear, and that's going to be one of the first indications of it. Do we have any other questions, Kyle?
So far, that's it.
Okay. Remember, please call us at 1-877-472-3389 or email us at info@cbsarcsafe.com. We'll wait a couple minutes here if anybody's got any other questions.
Got anything, Kyle? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you again, once again, for tuning in today's webinar. Again, 1-877-472-3389 or info@cbsarcsafe.com. Goodbye.